Let's take a look at this question. Here we want to convert this following while loop into a do while loop. If you look at this loop, we first created this variable called x and we initialized it to 0. This variable x would be our iterator. Then in the first statement of our while loop, we have a condition that's basically checking if x is lesser than 8. This would be our condition. As long as x is lesser than 8, basically as long as this condition is true, we're going to keep executing whatever's in this while loop. In the while loop, we'll just call this the block of code. We'll keep executing this block of code as long as the condition is true. And then after that, we have a println statement that's just printing the value of sum. If you notice, we don't have an update for x. The value of x is not changing, it's always 0. This means that this condition will always be true. This is an infinite loop, but we don't have to worry about that because we only need to convert from one type of a loop to another type of a loop. Here we need to convert from this while loop to a do while loop. Now by now you must have noticed that every loop has 4 main parts. Usually it has an iterator, it has a condition, it has an update, and it has a block of code that keeps getting executed. And I say usually because if you notice, this particular loop does not have an update. In a for loop, you need to have an iterator, a condition, and an update. But while loops and do while loops, you can modify it and use it however you want. In most good loops, however, you need to have an iterator, a condition, an update, and a block of code. Every loop has all of these 4 elements. Every type of loop is just the rearrangement of these 4 elements. If you look at a for loop, you have the iterator first, then you have your condition, and then you have your update. In a while loop, you would declare your iterator first, you would use the while statement to check for the condition, and inside you have a block of code, and after this you could have an update. As you can see, they're both quite similar, it's just the order is different. So here, when you want to convert from one form to another, it's always useful to identify these 4 main parts of the loop and just rearrange this loop. If you look at this loop, we know that we have an iterator, we have a condition, we have a block of code as well. We just need to rearrange them into a do while loop. To do that, let me just write the generic form of a do while loop. If I take a do while loop that uses an iterator, we're obviously going to create our iterator first. We're going to initialize it to some initial value. Then we're going to have our do keyword and we're going to have parentheses. And inside the parentheses, you will have a block of code and an update. And after this, you'll finally have your while keyword. And in these brackets, you're just going to check for your condition. You will execute this block of code and you will execute this update as long as this condition is true. Now, if I want to convert from a while loop to a do while loop, I'll just need to use these elements and I need to plug them in over here. What's our iterator? Our iterator is just x and we're initializing it to 0. So I can just replace this with the same statement, the exact same statement. Int x is equal to 0. Then we have our block of code. If you look at this, the block of code is just this statement. Sum is equal to x plus x modulus 3. And I can just write exactly that. I can remove this. I can write sum is equal to x plus x modulus 3. After this, we have our update. This loop does not have an update. And since we don't have an update, we can just ignore this. Finally, we have a condition. The condition, as you can see, is just checking if x is lesser than 8. We can write exactly that, while x is lesser than 8. And finally, we'll just add a semicolon over here. As you can see, we've added an iterator, we added our condition, and we also added our block of code. After our entire loop completes executing, we have a final println statement. This is also part of a program, so we're going to add that as well. I'm just going to write it as system.out.println println and the variable sum. All we did is that we identified the relevant parts of the loop and we just rearranged them to get a different type of loop. It's pretty simple. Let's look at another similar question. Here, we want to convert this following for loop into a do while loop. As usual, we can identify the four main components of this loop. First, we have a variable called temp, which is initialized to 0. Then we have a variable called check, which is initialized to 20. And then we have our for loop. In a for loop, it's much easier to see what's the iterator, what's the condition, what's the update. You can see that we're using the variable I over here. So this is going to be our iterator. We're initializing our iterator. Then I is lesser than 30 is going to be our condition. And finally, I++ is going to be our update. And this whole statement over here, that's the block of code because it's inside our for loop. And outside the for loop, we're just printing temp times check. Since we know these different components, it's much easier to rearrange it into a do while loop. Let's again write the generic form of a do while loop. If I take a do while loop, we first have an iterator. We have our do keyword, and inside this do keyword, you will have your block of code, and then you will have your update. Finally, you'll have the while keyword, and inside these brackets, you'll have the condition and a semicolon to end it. Here you can see that our iterator is this variable I and it's being initialized to 1. So I can just replace it with exactly that. I can write it as int I is equal to 1. Then we have a block of code. This whole thing would be a block of code. I can remove this and I can just add that over here. We can write temp is equal to temp plus I plus 1. That's the first statement. So we've written this statement. Next we have this statement, check is equal to check plus I. So I can just write check is equal to check plus I. This is the second statement. So this would be our block of code. And then finally we have our update. Our update, as you can see, is just increasing the value of I by 1. So we can just write that. We can write I++ as the update. For the condition is checking if I is lesser than 30. So I can replace this with that condition. I is lesser than 30. If you notice our for loop, after the whole loop, we just have this println statement. So here as well, after this do while loop, we can just add that println statement. I can just write system.out.println temp times check. And so this is going to be the same for loop rearranged and rewritten as a do while loop. Finally, we'll take a look at this question, which is a bit different. Here we want to convert this do while loop into a for loop, and we also want to find the output of the loop. Since we want to find the output of this loop, I'm going to add this blue box to represent the output window. So here we're going to first identify the main parts of this loop. We first created a variable called x of the int data type and we initialized it to 1. Then we created a variable called y of the int data type and we initialized this to 15. And we have this do while loop where we have this as the block of code inside the parentheses. And finally, in the while statement, we have our condition. As long as y is lesser than 20, we're going to keep executing this block of code. After our loop, we just have a println statement that just prints the value of x. If you notice, we have two variables here and both the variables are changing. Both of them are getting updated. So which of these variables is going to be the iterator? If you look at the condition is checking for the value of y. Y is controlling the number of times the loop is getting executed. So this is going to be our iterator. And this would be the update. So now we have all our four parts. We have an iterator, we have a block of code, we have an update, and we also have a condition. Let's write down a general form of a for loop first. If you look at a for loop, we first create the iterator. So we initialize the iterator. Then we have our condition. And then we have our update. And inside the parentheses, we have our block of code. We can just replace every single part of this for loop with what we've found in this do while loop. It's as simple as that. So the iterator is just y and we're initializing it to 15. I can just remove this and write that down. Int y is equal to 15. Then we have our condition. Our condition is just checking if y is lesser than 20. I can write that down as well. While y is lesser than 20. Then we have our update. Our update is just increasing the value of y by 1. So I can just write down y plus plus over here. Then we have our block of code. If you look at the block of code, I already wrote down the update over here. So this is going to be the main block of code. I can just write that down here. X is equal to x times y. Now you might have noticed I didn't initialize x yet. I can't initialize x inside the loop because if I put int x is equal to 1 here, it's going to keep resetting the value of x. If you look at this do while loop, x was initialized before the do while loop. So here as well, we can initialize x before this for loop. I can write int x is equal to 1 before this for loop. So by now, we've written this statement, this statement, this statement, this statement, and this statement. Finally, we have a println statement. It's after the loop, so I can just add it after the for loop as well, which is printing x. So system.out.println x. Now that we've rewritten this loop, we just need to find out the output of the loop. When you rewrite a loop, all you're changing are the order of the elements, but the output, in most cases, it won't change. So here as well, if you look at this for loop and this do while loop, both of them are going to give you the same output. But now to evaluate the output, I'm going to be using the do while loop. Here, since we want to find out the output of this loop, I'm going to create a table so that we can track the iterator. First, we have the iterator. The iterator we're using is y. So I'm going to write down y. Then we have the condition. The condition is just checking if y is lesser than 20. And finally, we have our update. That's just increasing the value of y by 1. So y plus plus. In this block of code, since we're printing the value of x, we'll also need to track the value of x. X is initially 1. So I'm just going to write that down over here. And we're going to keep tracking the value of x as we keep executing this loop. Initially, the value of y is 15. And now that we've initialized y, we can start executing the loop. The first thing we have in our loop is we're changing the value of x. We have this statement. X is equal to x times y. X is 1, y is 15. So the new value of x is going to be 1 times 15, basically 15. After this, we have y plus plus. That's just increasing the value of y by 1. So the new value of y is going to be 16. Then we're going to move on to the condition and we're going to check this condition. The condition is checking if y is lesser than 20. Basically, we're checking if 16, the new value of y, is lesser than 20. And this condition is obviously true. Here, since this condition is true, we're going to move back to the block of code. If you look at the block of code, the first statement is changing the value of x. X is equal to x times y. Here both the x value and the y value changed. I can rewrite this by just substituting for the values of x and y. I can write this as x is equal to, x is currently 15, so 15 times y is 16, so 16. The new value of x is just going to be 15 times 16, basically 240. So the value of x changes from 15 to 240. Then we're going to move on to the update. The update is just increasing y by 1. y is currently 16, so it's going to increase 16 by 1, so that the new value of y becomes 17. We check the condition again. We check if y is lesser than 20, basically if 17 is lesser than 20. This condition is true. Here, since this condition 17 is lesser than 20 is true, we're going to move back to the block of code. In our block of code, x is equal to x times y. X is 240, y is 17. So the value of x is just going to be 240 times 17. 240 times 17 is going to be 4080. So we're going to change the value of x from 240 to 4080. Again, we have our update that's increasing y by 1. So y is going to increase from 17. It's going to increase by 1. Y is going to become 18. We again have our condition. Now the condition is checking if 18 is lesser than 20. The condition changed. Even this condition is true. So since this condition is true, we're going to move back to the block of code. The first thing we have in our block of code is x is equal to x times y. Both values changed, so I have to rewrite the statement. X is currently 4080, y is currently 18, so the new value of x is 4080 times 18. And this is going to give us a pretty large number. This is going to be equal to 73,440. Once we increase the value of x, we're going to move to the update. That's just increasing y by 1. Since y is 18, y is now going to change by 1, and it's now going to become 19. Finally, we have the condition again. Since the value of y changed, I'll have to check the condition again. Our condition is now checking if 19 is lesser than 20. This condition is obviously true. Since this condition is true, we're going to move to the block of code. Now, the value of x has changed to 73,440. The value of y is 19. X is equal to x times y. I can rewrite that as x is equal to 73,440 times the value of y, which is 19. And this is going to be equal to this large number, 1,395,360. Now, since we've changed the value of x, we're finally going to change the value of y. Y is going to increase by 1. Y is currently 19, so 19 is going to increase by 1 to make the final value of y 20. And this is the final value because if you notice, 20 is not lesser than 20. This condition is going to become false. And since the condition is false, we're going to stop executing this loop and we're just going to move on to this println statement. The println statement is just printing the value of x. We found out that the value of x is this large number. So on your output window, you are going to see this large number, 1,395,360 as your output. To check if our output is correct or not, I just took the same piece of code in my code editor. And now if I run this program, you can see that we do get our output as 1,395,360. And here, if you can see, I just replaced that do while loop with the for loop that we found before. Now when I run this program, you can see that we get the exact same output. So it doesn't really matter if you find the output for a do while loop or a for loop. As long as you're using the same iterator, condition, and update, you're usually going to get the same output.